Well, welcome everyone to my latest attempt to take down Disney. I am but one voice crying out in the wilderness, and I will be thought of the crazy man who's eating locusts, but I'm committed to the task. But we're going to start somewhere else. Some interesting things have happened in the news a couple weeks ago that I thought would be relevant to tonight's discussion. Just a few days ago, Tucker Carlson went on the Joe Rogan podcast, the largest audio platform in the world, and said UFOs are real, they're angels, demons. Okay? Last week, Russell Brand got baptized. I don't know if some of you probably know who that is, but he's this British guy who's got, we'll say, a checkered background. Married to Katy Perry, done all the psychedelics, and he's done all the things, and he's decided apparently to convert to Christianity. Just a few weeks ago, I was talking about some atheists. We were talking about secular humanism and things of that sort. So I quoted Richard Dawkins, and just to bring fresh to your mind one of his most famous lines from his book, The God Delusion, this is what he wrote there. The God of the Old Testament is arguably the most unpleasant character in all fiction. Jealous and proud of it, a petty, unjust, unforgiving control freak, a vindictive, bloodthirsty ethnic cleanser, a misogynistic, homophobic, racist, infanticidal, genocidal, filicidal, pestilential, megalomaniacal, sadomasochistic, capriciously malevolent bully. But this is what he said about 2 weeks ago. I do think we are culturally a Christian country. I call myself a cultural Christian. I'm not a believer, but there is a distinction between being a believing Christian and a cultural Christian. I love hymns and Christmas carols, and I sort of feel at home in the Christian ethos. And I feel that we are a Christian country in that sense. I would not be happy if, for example, we lost all our cathedrals and our beautiful parish churches. So I call myself a cultural Christian, and I think it would be truly dreadful if we substituted any alternative religion. That's an interesting change in tune, but a highly suspicious one, if you ask me. And if you know Douglas Murray, okay? Another British intellectual, super smart, vicious in debates, like because of how good he is, that kind of thing. He's gay, but the last few years he's been writing about the death of the West and saying we need to save the West from collapse. So he's sort of been an ally in some ways in the discussion about things going on in the culture. And he said the same thing, basically. He's a cultural Christian, even though he's an atheist, homosexual. Some of you will definitely know who Jordan Peterson is. Okay, so Canadian, again, very much an ally in a lot of the cultural fronts and one of the most articulate defenders of the necessity to speak the truth. Right, things like that, like very Christian, you might say. And he's out there doing these tours, teaching the Bible. Jill and I actually went. He was here in Columbus. I kind of wanted to hear what it was like in person. Right, he's missing some things, but some of it was very interesting. Right? So there's this sort of Christian ethos surrounding him, and he's actually one of the few people that I don't know personally that I pray for. Because, you know, I see him as he could be the next C.S. Lewis. You know, he's that guy. Like, we need him. Just, Jesus, just a little bit more, man. One more step. Eric Weinstein, all right, another incredible intellectual. Jewish background, scientist, mathematician, economist, that kind of guy. Historically, you know, has rejected the faith that he was brought up in, but lately he's been saying, I think we're wrong about that. We need religion. So, is he embracing the faith of his fathers? No. Has he put his faith in Jesus Christ? No. Have any of these people really converted in the most genuine sense? I see no evidence of that, and yet they're all saying we need more Jesus in the world. What's going on? Famously, I think it was Pascal, he referred to the God-shaped hole, right? That was in every man, that only God can fill. Perhaps there's something like that going on. This secular humanist project that we've been undergoing in the Western world has hit the bottom of the well and found there's nothing down here. Right? So what I've been talking about up to this point as disenchantment, now we're at the bottom and there's this need to re-enchant. And that's what we're talking about here over these last few weeks. When you tear something down, very few people are content to just enjoy its demolition. You tear something down so that something else can be put in its place. And so what we're doing over these next few weeks is we're asking what is trying to be put in its place. Maybe I have this sense, there's this overwhelming feeling that it's Hail Mary time. But these people who are proud secular humanists and atheists and things of the sort are realizing that that society's about to go over the edge of the will. And we're on the cusp of losing something at a level of civilization, and we need to fight for it. So it's like, oh, this is it. No more exits. We got to stop right now. And they're recognizing that at a foundational level, you don't get Western civilization without the biblical worldview. So even though they won't convert, they'll say we need more of that. God has been exorcised from the culture, but now the culture is in despair without him. And I think about how that's related to the transition in our Bible teaching this semester from Judges to Samuel. Right, what was the line that repeats in Judges? There was no king in those days, and everyone did that which is right in their own eyes. Right, so for hundreds of years, that was the state. There was no thriving civilization. It was chaos. And so finally they said, well, that must be it. We don't have the right ruler. So Samuel, give us a king. God says, are you sure about that? I'm supposed to be your king. And if you trust me, things will work out a lot better for you. No, we want a king. That's what we need. So there's this deep impulse, even in the rebel's heart, that when all fails, when the rebellion gets to the end, the bottom, whatever you want to call it, pick your metaphor, there's this sense of, okay, I need a king. I need someone to reign over me. It's been my contention for many years now that worship is fundamental to what it means to be a human being. We can't not worship someone or something. And after years and years and years and generations of trying to say, I'm going to be my own God, people are realizing that that doesn't work. And so people are crying out for a king. And then I didn't get much deep into this. I don't have time for this nonsense. But apparently there's this Christ is King controversy some of you know about, been going on. That apparently people have been using this as a slogan. And people are saying that if you say Christ is King, you're being anti-Semitic or something like that. Or it's Christian nationalism, something like that. And it does appear that there's a modicum of truth in that. That there are some people that are using this phrase as a kind of slogan to saying, my team's better than your team. They're bringing mascot Jesus out, right, to try to beat down their opponent. Christ is King. And there does appear that there's some of that going on from what little I know. I'm not going to go too deep in, because like I said, I ain't got time for this. But the statement is true, is it not? And I would say this, if Christ isn't king, here's what I believe about what's happening in our society now. If Christ is not king, we are on the road to paganism. So, in this project of rebelling, getting away from God as fast as we can, as far away as we can, and realizing that we're about to go over the cliff. We've removed God. Now what are we going to put in God's place? There's only one answer. It's always the same. It's paganism. Paul said it in Romans 1. Although they knew God, they did not honor him as God. Who do you honor? Kings. So they knew him, but they didn't honor him as God or give thanks to him, but they became futile in their thinking, and their foolish hearts were darkened. Claiming to be wise, They became fools and exchanged the glory of the immortal God for images resembling mortal man and birds and animals and creeping things. You know what that is? Paganism. And if you go and look at that text in Romans 1, which has sort of been one of our theme texts for this semester, what you'll find that follows this in the next 3 paragraphs is that the next trait is that they actually worship creation itself. And of course, this worship of the creation and not the creator is associated with the dishonoring of the body. So those who are given over to actually worshiping created things instead of the creator actually dishonor the created thing. God's crowning creative achievement is being dishonored by the same people that are worshiping created things. And then in the next paragraph, we see that sexual depravity is unleashed as a result, and it's connected to a counterfeit view of the self. And then in the paragraph after that, we just have this list, and it basically describes absolute societal rot and chaos. Evil, we might say. And what is that? It's the consequence of not honoring him or giving thanks to him. Paganism. So that's the road to paganism. Romans 1 is the road to paganism, and we are on it. And it seems to me that we are near the destination than the beginning. Why should we care? Right? Because Christ is king, right? I don't have to worry about that stuff. He wins in the end. Well, Paul says this to young Timothy, 1 Timothy 4. Now the Spirit expressly says that in later times some will depart from the faith by devoting themselves to deceitful spirits and teachings of demons. You know that demons teach? There are isms and ologies that are going all over the world. And what Paul is saying to young Timothy is, this is from the Spirit himself, and he says that people will leave the faith to follow these ideologies, these doctrines of demons. That's why it matters. And through the insincerity of liars whose consciences are sealed, right? These people are going to be led away by these false teachers. And that wasn't new. There's a certain sense in which he's prophesying, right? He's saying that in the latter times that will be characteristic of those days. But that wasn't new. And so it's not new prophetically. It wasn't new in Paul's day, because you could go all the way back to Jeremiah and see the same thing. In chapter 2, God says this, has a nation changed its gods even though they are no gods? But my people have changed their glory for that which does not profit. Does this sound a little bit like Romans 1? They've exchanged their glory for that which does not profit. So he's describing the people and the rebellion as a form of idolatry, worshiping gods that aren't real gods, and glory that isn't real glory. But they did it anyways. There's no profit, but they did it anyways. So he says this, be appalled, O heavens, at this. Be shocked. Be utterly desolate, declares the Lord. For my people have committed 2 evils. So here's the diagnosis of Yahweh himself on this problem. They have committed 2 evils. And he's talking about his people. Here's the first one. They have forsaken me, the fountain of living waters. What I've been calling this semester disenchantment. Rebellion. That's the first thing they did. They could have had me, but they chose something else. They ran away from me. That was the first evil. The second, they have hewed out cisterns for themselves, broken cisterns that can hold no water. So, they got rid of me, and they put something in place of me. Those are the 2 evils. I'm the fountain of living water. That's what they rejected. And what did they get in place of me? Cisterns that can't even hold water. It's already demotion to go from a fountain to a cistern. But the cistern itself doesn't work. That's how desolate this condition is. And then through the prophet Jeremiah, that described Israel. And it's my view that at times in history, and perhaps even today, it's descriptive of much of today's church, or what passes for the church. So maybe at this point, the reader, the listener is thinking, okay, that was a problem in Jeremiah's day, that was a problem in Paul's day, but is that really what we're dealing with now? Paganism, like really? Like Zeus and that Apollo and all that stuff? Yes. Actually, yes. It's timeless. So for the Hebrew people that were brought out of Egypt, right? The Bible comes onto the scene. There's already religions in the world. There are nations in the world. And the Bible enters the scene of history to be a systematic takedown of all those religious systems. It is fundamentally a polemic against the Egyptian paganism, against the Sumerian paganism, against Babylonian paganism, against Canaanite paganism. That's very much what the Bible exists to do. And that was when it first entered the scene. And then you see this come up through history, right? So later in the period of Kings, and we'll get to this in the fall, right? What do you have? You have a war between Yahweh and Baal, right? The pagan system of worship. And Yahweh says, look, there's 850 false prophets, and there's one left who's speaking the truth. But you people, you need to make a choice. You choose paganism, or you choose me. It was also the time, or the issue during the time of the New Testament, right? Greco-Roman paganism. Now, Paul prophesied, we read in 1 Timothy, that it would be descriptive of the latter times. So the biblical narrative, and I should add this, it's in Revelation. Right? So the biblical narrative has the people of God as a foil to paganism from Egypt to the final eschaton. It's always this battle between Christianity and paganism. Indeed, you can see that the roots of paganism can be found in the garden. Before Adam and Eve, there's a description of Lucifer's fall in Isaiah 14. And I won't read it for time's sake, but the story is basically this. In his pride, he thinks, I know there's a Most High God, but in all of creation, there is nothing more beautiful than me, which is true. In all of creation, there's nothing more wise than me, which is true. And he was so enamored with his own glory that he thought he could share the throne of Yahweh. That is, in some sense, the invention of polytheism. There's one Most High God, but I can share it. I can be God too. And isn't that the lie he told Eve? There is a God. And he doesn't want you to be like him. But if you will eat from that fruit, you will be as gods. So the first lie was essentially an indoctrination into polytheism. So there's a couple of different ways of thinking about what paganism is. I'm calling them classic paganism and practical paganism. I'll just talk about them briefly, and then I'll probably use these terms interchangeably. Classic paganism, so the term emerged around the 4th century. It's a Latin term. It comes from a Latin word for rustic, and was basically the way the Christians described the polytheistic folk religions that they would encounter all over the world. So it directly spoke to Roman mythology, paganism, that the church was growing in. But also, as the gospel was spreading, they would encounter these lands that might be Celtic or Norse or whatever. They had very similar theologies, different names of gods and goddesses, but they noticed that there was something very similar between all of these polytheistic systems. And then Christians started lumping them all together under one term, paganism. So for a while there, Christians thought of there's Christianity and everything else is pagan. So it was a huge term. So it was primarily Roman paganism, but it ended up, as the gospel spread, as the gospel spread, confronting paganism and other folk religions as well. Over time, just FYI to make sure we cover our bases here, while it began primarily as polytheism, over time, paganism would morph into pantheism and panentheism, and we will talk about those versions of paganism the next 2 weeks as we talk more about re-enchantment. But then there's also practical paganism, which is about the value system of paganism. So it's not so concerned about the doctrines, or I should say the religious claims about the identities of the people. And so you might say classic paganism is a coherent religion in some sense, and practical paganism is just the values of that religion. And it's about embracing the ethics and values of that system. So it's practical paganism. I might even say it's very much like what Richard Dawkins and these people are describing when they call themselves cultural Christians. What they're saying is, I reject the claims of Christianity, but I want Christianity because I want Christian culture. Right? So there's something like this in paganism. There's classic paganism and there's practical paganism. I just want the ethics. I want the basic philosophy of it, but not the essential doctrines. And this turns out to be characteristically profoundly hedonistic. This is sort of one of those traits that we find with paganism. Wherever it goes, what we find is that people, the gods and goddesses, if you know much about the stories in these folk religions, most of us learn a little bit about Greek and Roman, occasionally about Egyptian, but if you go deeper and you learn about the others, you realize they're gross. They're perverted. And there's so many of them that if you are a practitioner of practical paganism, whatever appetite there is that you have, there's a god for you, who reflects those desires. And you could say, I'll be like that god or that goddess, that kind of thing. So in some sense, in paganism, they do create God in their own image. And I also want to point this out because this is part of what we've talked about this semester. Do you remember a few weeks ago we talked about the surveys of today, the religious surveys have demonstrated that the vast majority of American citizens, whatever it is they claim to believe, in reality, they only cling to a portion of the essential doctrines of that, and they piecemeal their own worldview, which is to say, the primary religious worldviews of America in 2024 are syncretism, or everyone doing that which is right in his own eyes, and what we called moralistic therapeutic deism. Right? These are the real religions, right? They're piecemeal value systems. The essential claims are irrelevant. You could take one out and put something else in its place. And paganism has these traits. Highly syncretistic. You've heard of Hellenism, right? So Alexander, he conquers the world. And when he goes into these places, he learns about their religion. And I can't remember what the term was, but there was actually a term. And it was basically formalized syncretization. So they would go in, they would find out what their gods and goddesses and their beliefs were, and they would proactively amalgamate the views, right? So say, hey, we can live in the same world, right? In fact, we even have new gods and goddesses emerging as a result. I think I mentioned this offhandedly recently. There's the messenger god in Greek, Hermes, right? Well, the Egyptian equivalent is Thoth, right? And when Alexander gets to Egypt and they syncretize their religions, a new god emerged. He's the messenger god, but he has a new name. It's Hermes Trismegistus, right? It's literally a new god crafted in the fires of pagan syncretism. There are also, it is astonishing how similar these different pagan systems are. Greece and Rome, yes, we know that. But it's more similar than just that. Like I said, Egypt, Babylon, Sumerians, Canaanites, Norse, even some of the Eastern mythologies. It is amazing what they have in common. It almost makes you wonder if they're all telling a perverted version of one original story that was true. There's a common cosmology, meaning like the way the world came into existence. Something like there's some sort of elemental spirits of some kind, and then there's a great cataclysm, very much analogous to Noah's flood. And there's also, in all of these paganistic systems, there's a hierarchy of gods. In fact, most of the gods and goddesses that we know their names of, they're not the gods, they're actually demigods, because they are the offspring of the gods and human females in many cases. Does that sound like a passage of scripture that we've ever read? There's a pagan soteriology or salvation. And the message is, it's what, I don't know if you care to learn these terms, but it's called apotheosis. Right? It's the way something becomes divine. Right? And this is the way in all of these pagan systems. It's becoming God. And there's a common pantheon. You can swap out all these names. There's a father god and a mother god. There's a son of God. There's a storm god. There's all these things. It's incredible how well they align right over top of each other. Like I mentioned, the Genesis 6 thing, they all have a version of Genesis 6. They all have their version of that episode. It suggests to me that it really happened. What really happened is that some beings who are not Homo sapiens, fallen angels, whatever you want to call them, they came in, they made it, somehow they produced offspring. Yes, that's really what it says. And I think that's why all the other pagan systems say the same thing. What do you think Minotaur are, and Centaur are, and Satyrs are? They're half-breeds of one part human and one part something else. Right? So in these systems, what we have are gods and demigods, right? They're Nephilim, would be the biblical term. And we have some of those all over our culture now. The Nephilim are back, in pop culture at least. The Bible even refers to these Nephilim, the offspring of we'll call them the gods and humans, Nephilim, and it even refers to them as the heroes of renown. Well, wouldn't you know that many of our heroes of renown now, they fit this bill? We'll get to that in just a minute. But there's also the moralistic therapeutic impulse is very much there. If you learned about Greek mythology or Roman mythology in school, the way you probably learned about it was as morality tales. You learned this story of so-and-so, this god, this goddess, and then there was and what's the moral of the story? Right? That's how we learned it. Guys, it was their religion. They actually believed that stuff, and it was more than just morality tales. And I've been talking about this a lot lately because I'm kind of on this right now. This is one of the reasons that Christians today don't get their Bibles, because we read the Bible like it's nothing but morality tales. And we need to get rid of that hermeneutic. Can we build morals off of it? Absolutely, there's no better place. But the Bible exists to tell us about who God is and what he did, not just give us morality tales. And so when we read the Bible to get moral lessons out of it, what we are doing is reading the Bible like pagans. In many cases, there are messages of empowerment, enlightenment, right? There's a hyper focus on the self and the inner self in many of these stories. Sound familiar? Well, I believe that we are experiencing a pagan revival right here. It's happening. It's here. Just let me give you some examples. In pop culture, the gods, literally the gods of Marvel and the comics. So if you watch the Marvel movies or read the comics, you'll learn about Thor and Odin and Loki and Hela, the goddess of death. Right? They're actually part of Norse mythology. Like, you know that, right? Oh, well, that's just fun. That's what they may say. And then there's the Eternals, which I didn't watch, but many of these beings are like even above or more powerful, right? Which is, again, that pantheon, that hierarchy in these pagan views, very similar. Thanos, right? Well, I think it's probably just a clever way of rewording. So there's a Greek word, thanatos, which is Greek, and there was a god named Thanatos, and he was the god of death. Right? So there's an homage there. And then there's Ego. Anyone watch Guardians of the Galaxy? All right? Ego's like the living planet. That's literally Ego, the living planet. Right? He's a god. And one day he meets a human female that he finds attractive, and he produces offspring with her. His name is Peter Quill. So there's a biblical category for that. Peter Quill is Nephilim. You see? And maybe this is just entertainment, right? But then there's Vision, right? There's Captain America, and there's Hulk, and there's Ibram, and there's Iron Man. And what are these? They're human beings who through some scientific means become superhuman beings. Or we might say the Ubermensch, the Overman, right? They're Supermen in a way. And they aren't gods, but through technology, they've become closer to being like gods. And this transhumanism impulse, we've talked about it. It's very much a pagan impulse to be like gods. If I can't get that through mysticism, if I can't get that through spell, maybe I can get there through science. Now let's have a little fun. Moana. Let's start there. If you know the story, this is a Disney movie. You have a young, empowered female who is native, and so you'll see a lot of ancestor worship, necromancy, consulting of the dead, mysticism, a veneration of the earth, and more. That's nothing compared to the messaging of the movie. There's a famous song that came out of it, and I listened to it a couple times actually today. It's actually a pretty good song, like musically. I enjoy it. I'm just going to read the words for you, okay? Now, have in mind who this is. This is a young girl who has inherited a way of life that's very native and animistic and that kind of thing, but she has a longing in her heart for something bigger. I've been standing at the edge of the water long as I can remember, never really knowing why. I wish I could be the perfect daughter, but I come back to the water, no matter how hard I try. So what she's saying is, my vision is out there, but everyone behind me is saying, no, we need you here. Right? But she's got something calling her away. Every turn I take, every trail I track, every path I make, every road leads back to the place I know, where I cannot go, where I long to be. And again, looking out, she says, see the line where the sky meets the sea? It calls me. No one knows how far it goes. If the wind in my sail on the sea stays behind me, one day I'll know. If I go, there's just no telling how far I'll go. Back on the island, I know everybody on this island seems so happy on the island. Everything is by design. I know everybody on this island has a role on this island. So maybe I can roll with mine. Right? What's she saying? Society is telling me to conform. Maybe I'll give that a shot. I could lead with pride. I can make us strong. I'll be satisfied if I play along. But the voice inside sings a different song. Oh, what is wrong with me? See the light as it shines on the sea. It's blinding. But no one knows how deep it goes, and it seems like it's calling out to me. So come find me and let me know what's beyond that line. Will I cross that line? See the line where the sky meets the sea. It calls me. She keeps saying this. And no one knows how far it goes. If the wind in my sail on the sea stays behind me, one day I'll know how far I'll go. So we have is this young woman who resents the happy life that she's about to inherit, and she has a desire to go into the beyond, and she's tired of the pressure to conform, and she wants to respond to that call within. Okay? I've never heard that message in a Disney movie, right? So it's almost like if you're watching an eye roll, right? I've heard this a million times, and I think Disney knows that. Because they give voice to that criticism in another song in the same movie. There's a movie, Shining, sung by a crab or something like that, a giant crab. Listen to one of the lines. Did your granny say, listen to your heart, be who you are on the inside? He's giving voice to the critic, which is me, by the way. I need 3 words to tear her argument apart. Your granny lied. Nailed it. But he's a villain. Do you see the subversion here? Truth came out of the mouth of the villain in this case. And that's the way you subvert the truth. Who are you rooting for in the story? Moana. And the truth that you're supposed to believe is the one that lies inside her heart. But when truth is actually spoken, it's spoken by a villain, so you reject it. So they actually brought to bear on their own lie the truth, just so they could subvert it and knock it out of the water. Do you see that trick there? Let's talk about Frozen. So you've got a magical world to begin with right there. Enough said, there are trolls and all that. And her famous song, Let It Go. I'm going to torch you, right? We all heard it 1,000 times. Here's 1,001. I won't sing it though. Although Karis, my kid can sing it. But just, were you listening? The snow glows white on the mountain tonight, not a footprint to be seen, a kingdom of isolation, and it looks like I'm the queen. The wind is howling like the swirling storm inside. Couldn't keep it in, heaven knows, I've tried. So there's this battle within that's raging. Don't let them in, don't let them see. Be the good girl you always have to be. Same song as Moana, conform. Conceal, don't feel, don't let them know. Well, now they know, right? I let it out. So, what's her anthem? Let it go, let it go. Can't hold back anymore. Let it go, let it go. Turn away and slam the door. I don't care what they're going to say. Let the storm rage on. The cold never bothered me anyway. Oh, what a great anthem of female empowerment. Don't let them tell you who you are. You just let it out. It's funny how some distance makes everything seem small, and the fears that once controlled me can't get to me at all. It's time to see what I can do, to test the limits and break through. No right, no wrong, no rules for me. I'm free. Let it go. Let it go. I am one with the wind and sky. Let it go, let it go. You'll never see me cry. Here I stand and here I stay. Let the storm rage on. My power flurries through the air and into the ground. Sounds like a spell. My soul is spiraling in frozen fractals all around, and one thought crystallizes like an icy blast. I'm never going back. The past is in the past. Right, because she's free, now that she can let her inner self out. Let it go, let it go. When I rise like the break of dawn, let it go, let it go. The perfect girl is gone. Here I stand in the light of day. Let the storm rage on. The cold never bothered me anyway. And if you saw Frozen 2, it's just straight up classical paganism, but we won't go into that. We don't have time. Let's do another one. The Little Mermaid. Maybe you're thinking this is just a recent trend. Let's go back to my childhood, okay? The Little Mermaid. Have you ever thought about that story? First of all, just consider the setting. You have mer people. How do you get mer people? When humans and non-humans create some sort of counterfeit offspring. There's a story in the Bible about that. Okay? So that's there. The ruler of the mer people, his name is Triton, who, if you know anything about Greek mythology, is the offspring of Poseidon. And guess what? Poseidon is one of these gods who had relations with a human female and produced demigods, whom Triton is one of, which means he is Nephilim. And this is just all washing us over, right? That's just the setting for the story. Mer people, right? Nephilim. And in this story, there's a 15-year-old girl who desires something that she cannot have because her biology does not allow it. And so she sings a beautiful song about it. And I listened to that one a couple times too. And it really is a beautiful song. And the lead up to the song, she actually says something like, well, maybe Daddy is right. Maybe this longing in my heart to be part of the world is wrong. But then she makes her case in the song. But how could a world so beautiful not be a good thing? And it's beautiful. It's this anthem, and you're rooting for her. All we want is for her to realize her virtuous dream. She sees something beautiful and she wants it. She sees a better life, she wants it. Aren't we rooting for her at this point? She just wants to be part of the world. She wants to enjoy the sun and the love and the sand and all these things. And she wants to sing and dance. You have to have feet for that. Daddy's not going to help her though. And so she sees a witch and she casts a spell to give her the inner desires of her heart. This is Ursula. And I think that we should rightly think of Ursula in this analogy as the last resort back alley surgeon. Right? I want someone or something that I can't have because my biology doesn't allow it. And if society doesn't provide me the medical care to make that happen, then I guess I'm going to have to go to Mexico and have a butcher do it. That's who Ursula is. She's the villain, but she's not really the villain. She's a last resort because there are other people who have power who could give her what she wants and deny it. We'll get back to that in a moment. What does it cost her to get what she wants? Her voice. Okay? So then the rest of the story unfolds, and it is essentially the systematic conversion of everyone in the story to agree with Ariel's cause. And this is illustrated, I think, especially in what's the crab's name? Sebastian. How did I forget? Right? Early on, he's a counselor with Triton, and she's like, Ariel, come on, this is nonsense. You can't do that. And he even sings Under the Sea. Right? He's an apologist for Triton. It's amazing down here. You don't want to go up there. What an incredible world you live in. It's so great and good and beautiful, singing the virtues of the world that she was made for. Right? But the next song, it's Kiss the Girl. Why is he singing that? Because he's converted. No longer is he telling Ariel that she's wrong to pursue the desire in his heart. He is now her voice that she doesn't have. He's become the advocate for Ariel. She can't sing, she can't speak. And so Sebastian uses his gifts. He's a musician, right? He's a composer. And so he controls nature around him, and he uses all of his musical gifts to be the voice for Ariel that she cannot be for herself. Kiss the girl. On the surface, Ursula's the villain, but I think really it's Triton. Because we learn later in the movie that all along he had the power to give her what she wants. But of course, the straight, strong, white male wouldn't let a woman have what she wants. Yes, you're supposed to see that. So disaster ensues, but fortunately the villain is snuffed out. All is well in the world, right? But in the process, Ariel's dreams are dashed. She loses her feet, and she's a mer person again. But then we get one more scene of conversion. It's Triton. He looks lovingly over at his daughter, whose hopes have been dashed. And there's this beautiful music that begins to play in the background. And you feel it. And you see the love in his eyes. And he just gently lays his trident on the water. And through his power of magic, he grants her the desires of her heart. And she becomes like one of them. She gets the biology she always wanted but never had. And so as this final act of love, he grants her perverted desire. And she sees it. Daddy, I love you. It's so sweet. Then there's a wedding. And then every character in the movie, and for the final 2 minutes, I thought about playing it. because we would enjoy it, right? Like, it's really pretty. It's a song of worship. All the mer people and all the human characters are there to celebrate this union, which is a wicked union. And they're singing a song that sounds very much like a worship song, and her anthem has become the anthem of a choir who have joined her now. I kid you not. And the final is this just incredibly cathartic, satisfying moment. Ariel finally got the body she needed to express the desires that she always had. And so our job, everyone in the story and the viewer, is to say, oh, that's amazing, and we will walk with you. And then as a final gesture, Triton takes his trident and he paints a rainbow in the sky. You think there was a little subversion going on there? Well, we could do this all night. I mean, it's Disney after all. I'm going to do this really briefly. I see 3 key pagan ideas in a lot of these things that I've talked about and then others. I'm going to be very brief here for time's sake, but we will be able to return to them. So, the first key pagan idea: desire equals identity. Desire equals identity. This was a lie that began in the Garden of Eden. What did Eve notice? That the fruit was desirable. And what did the serpent say? Go for it. Feed that desire. It's a holy desire. Eat the apple. In fact, that desire within you, it's not just a base physical need. It's who you are. It's who you were meant to be. Do you see that theme in all the stories we just read? Moana and Elsa and Ariel. They have a desire. Not just a desire that they want to fulfill, but a desire that defines them. And you know, I should have said this, but I forgot to. We need to go back to Frozen for just a minute. Because some of you loved Frozen, and you thought it was the most Christian Disney movie they ever made. Because there were at least 2 messages that were deeply Christian in that movie. You know, we're tired of the whole love thing, right? Where the knight in shining armor comes in and they have a stupid whirlwind romance, and we know that's not what love is. And Frozen was there to tell you that's not what love is. Love is about sacrifice. And we're like, whoa! There's also this thing you learn in the story that Elsa has this problem, right? And it's rooted in her fear, right? And it does damage to people around her because she's afraid. It's in all of her songs. It's in the dialogue. If she can just manage her fear, these problems will go away. And what's the big lesson, the big illumination she has at the end? It's when she says, I figured it out. Love will thaw. Which, by the way, that's 1 John. Perfect love casts out fear. You know what that is? That's a deliberate subversion. Right? I'm going to make you think that this is the most Christian Disney movie ever by putting Christian doctrine in it so that I can give you the real message, which is desire's identity. That's the real message. And this is how this paganism gets its way into the church. Syncretism. You take the pagan message of desire is identity, and you smuggle it with real Christian messages rooted directly in the scriptures, and they fall for it. This is a dangerous tactic, and fortunately, it's quite effective. One of the authors I read about leading up to this, he sort of defined paganism as the attempt to validate morally or spiritually a lifestyle governed by baser instincts and desires. So basically what he's saying is paganism is a religion to validate what you want. That's what it's there for. Desire is identity. The second key pagan idea is the divine feminine. Right, so goddess worship is a huge part of it. And we encounter that in the Bible. Right? We know about Baal, but there's also Asherah. She's the divine feminine in that pantheon. There's Artemis, who we encounter in Acts. That's the divine feminine in that. In all of these pagan systems, they have a divine feminine, an archetype. And this is all over our modern day too, right? What's one of the big messages of the 20s? We got to what? Tear down what? The patriarchy, right? We need to fundamentally turn civilization into a more feminine civilization. And so we're going to tell men to stop being men, right? And we call it what? Toxic masculinity, right? The future is, it's in my notes. We're married, right? It works. The future is female, right? But then Star Wars comes along, and who was excited most, boys or girls? Guys. We're finally going to get a new Star Wars movie. And what does Kathleen Kennedy tell us? The Force is female, right? That was her whole messaging. We're going to tear down the patriarchy. We're going to take one of your favorite heroes, and Luke Skywalker is still one of my favorite heroes, and we're going to tear him down. And we're going to take this silly girl and make her, and just overblow her, make her super powerful because the Force is female. But think, what's the Force? It's a mystical, magical force that binds everything together, and it's fundamentally female is the message, right? This is the divine feminine. This is goddess worship. We'll move on. The third idea, earth worship. That's Romans 1. Right? Instead of worshiping the creator, they worship the created things. You guys ever heard of Gaia? Right? Gaia is the pagan term for Mother Earth. Right? Father Sky, Mother Earth. Why is the earth mother? Well, because in this world, in this way of thinking, I should say, earth is the bringer of life. And so we refer to earth as our mother. And so Nancy Pelosi, when she argues her case for why we should pass a multi-billion or trillion-dollar package that's environmental in its focus, says that if we pass this, it will appease the earth's anger. That was our former Speaker of the House. Right? The earth's mad, and we need to appease it by passing this law. It's paganism. It's earth worship. And in the Old Testament, the chief god in the Canaanite area that the Israelites were always dealing with is Baal. He was a storm god, a weather god, a god of the harvest, right? An environmental god. And this is, we have one of those. You call it environmentalism, but it's essentially Baal worship. So let's wrap this up. There was no king in those days, and everyone did that which was right in his own eyes. Essentially, there was no king, so everyone was king. And if everyone is king, no one is king. But as Christians, we have no king but Jesus. But that cannot just be a slogan for us. It cannot just be a slogan. In Jeremiah, we read about the two sins that God's rebellious people committed. Essentially, one of disenchantment or demolition and one of re-enchantment or reconstruction. You know, when I do construction projects, a big project, I often even quote it this way. The first phase 1 is demolition. Phase 2, reconstruction. Right? We're experiencing that. Right? The project of tearing it all down is almost complete. But now the work is happening right before us of putting something in its place. And this is why I think this is important for us as Christians to talk about this at church. It's not just about coming in here so we can go, oh, look at the world. It's saying we need to be careful. It's my belief that many churches who did not participate in the demolition are participating in the reconstruction. Because we have Richard Dawkins in the world who want to make sure that we preserve cultural Christianity. And there are a lot of people going, yes, can you believe it? Richard Dawkins is about to be a Christian. No, what he's trying to do is steal Christianity. Because he's got nothing left. And like I said, I believe that many Christians who, even if they did not participate in the active deconstruction, they are participating in the pagan revival. And this has creeped into the church in many ways. And there are many churches too today that are actually the mouthpiece of paganism revived. There are many ways that this takes shape in the church, many slogans that are uttered, but it's basically just paganism. We read our Bibles like pagans. I want to end with a psalm. It's a really cool psalm, right? It is to paganism what Frozen is to Christianity, right? It's a subversion. Psalm 29, if you just sit down and read it, you go, that's a cool psalm. Isn't Yahweh great? But most scholars have observed that there's something going on in Psalm 29. You see, there were other gods, right? And it shouldn't surprise us that these gods were worshipped in songs and in poems and in rituals. And what Psalm 29 appears to be is a poem devoted to another god, where Baal's name is taken out and Yahweh's inserted. Right? It's a polemic. And there's some changes here and there, but it's a way of saying, ha ha. Right? So I just want to close our time by reading Psalm 29, which is a triumph. Right? On its face, it's triumphant. But it's more than that. It's a subversion. It's a polemic against this pagan worldview. And I don't know about you, but when I think about this, I can get a little discouraged. So I want to end on a high note, right? About thinking about the greatness of Yahweh. Ascribe to Yahweh, O mighty ones. Ascribe to Yahweh glory and strength. Ascribe to Yahweh the glory due his name. Worship Yahweh in the splendor of his holiness. The voice of Yahweh is over the waters. The God of glory thunders. Yahweh thunders over the mighty waters. The voice of Yahweh is powerful. The voice of Yahweh is majestic. The voice of the Lord breaks the cedars. Yahweh breaks in pieces the cedars of Lebanon. He makes Lebanon skip like a calf, Syrian like a young wild ox. The voice of Yahweh strikes with flashes of lightning. The voice of Yahweh shakes the desert. Yahweh shakes the desert of Kadesh. The voice of Yahweh twists the oaks and strips the forest bare. And in his temple all cry, glory! Yahweh sits enthroned over the flood. Yahweh is enthroned as king forever. Yahweh gives strength to his people. Yahweh blesses his people with peace. I'm really glad he ended there. Strength and blessing. I think a lot of people would think we're crazy for talking about this, but I actually believe this. I believe this is where we're going. In the end, there are two surviving worldviews, Christianity and paganism. In the end, we know that there's a reality that transcends material things, and we are exhausting that worldview. And people are looking for re-enchantment. And here's where they'll find it. If they do not find it in Christ the King, they will find it here. Because there will be a god or a goddess to suit their desires. So the next couple of weeks, we're going to talk about this theme of re-enchantment. It's all related to this, but we'll talk about some other ways that it's expressed. Just two of these, two more. And I hope this is helpful. I hope for the last one to be an optimistic one. You might not believe me. I'm not sure I believe me. But that's my goal. So let's wrap this one up. Lord, thank you so much for your power. Thank you so much for the triumph that you have already secured for us. Thank you that the final enemy to defeat it is death itself. Thank you that we look forward to a day when King Jesus will return. His feet will hit planet Earth. And there will be no rebellion left. There will be no room for suffering and justice. Lord, we look forward to a day when we will be with you and you will be our God, when we will walk with you for all of eternity with new hearts, with new lives fit for eternity. And until that day, Lord, I ask and continue to ask that you'd give us strength, that you'd give us peace, just like the psalm says. A strength not from looking within and believing that we're strong, but a strength from looking up and seeing that you are strong. A peace that is found not from looking within and thinking everything's going to be okay, but a peace that is an exercise of our faith and our confidence in you. So, Lord, make us a people who have real spiritual power. Make us a people who have deep and abiding peace. Not because we think we're so great, but because we are overwhelmed with your greatness. You win. And I'm so thankful for that. Amen.